Week 10 of the fantasy football season, and his wide receiver start sits for this week. The first start, Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers. I know Thielen, he's been a top 5 wide receiver in receptions this season in fantasy football, and he's definitely coming off a bad game versus the Indianapolis Colts in Week 9's game. Only 5 catches, 29 yards, but this week here, short week, and a good matchup on paper at the Chicago Bears with one of the worst secondaries in all the league. So Bryce Young, him and Adam Thielen have a good rapport this season. Adam Thielen's been one of the only bright spots for a tough season for this Carolina Panther team. That's 1-7, and on Thursday Night Football, it's usually high-scoring games for the most part. So I think after a bad game, Thielen bounces back, and we've seen him this season top 10 in fantasy points at the position, and he's a start staying in the same game. DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. So over the last few weeks with Tyson Beckett in there at quarterback, the numbers have definitely gone down for DJ Moore, with topping out with 13 fantasy points in PPR leagues, but the last 2 weeks the numbers have dropped off as well. Week 8 he only had 9.5 fantasy points versus the Chargers, and then last week here in Week 9 at the New Orleans Saints, only 5.40 fantasy points. So this week here versus former team, he's going to want to show him up, is DJ Moore. Possibly Justin Fields will be back in this game. We got to see if he's going to be back from the injury. And if he is, it's a big help, obviously, because Tyson Beckett and DJ Moore just aren't on the same page and don't have a good rapport, where we saw Moore and Justin Fields really hitting on all cylinders for the most part this season. So right now, if Moore gets Justin Fields back in the lineup, that's a huge plus for him. But either way, versus former team, the juice is always flowing. He's a start. Chris Godwin is start as well. I know Godwin's coming off an awful game, 2 catches, 16 yards. But this week here, a good matchup for Tampa Bay with Tennessee to come into town. And we know you could pass on this Tennessee Titan team. Running on them is a different story for the most part. But Baker Mayfield's looked good this season in his first year with this Tampa Bay Buck team. Chris Godwin and him have been building a rapport, but obviously one bad game last week from Houston isn't going to make me shy away from Godwin. So I think Godwin bounces back with a good game in this one. Next starts Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers. So Brandon Ayuk, in my opinion, is the number 1 wide receiver over there for this Niner team. They're coming off a bye week, and I think they're going to be refreshed and ready to go here. I know it's a tough matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars, one of the better teams this season in the AFC, and also a team that leads the league in turnovers on defense. But Brandon Ayuk, one of the better route runners in the league. Him and Brock Purdy have a good chemistry. And coming off the bye week, like I said, you get healthier, you get things ironed out. And I think this San Francisco offense ironed out and get things going. And this week here, even in a little bit of a tougher matchup, I like Ayuk as a start. Next start, Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Deontay Johnson coming off a great game in the Week 9 victory versus the Tennessee Titans. 7 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown. And this week here, another pretty decent matchup versus the Green Bay Packers. So we know Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson have a great rapport. One of the better route runners in the league is Johnson. And also, he's one of the best possession wide receivers with very good hands, and pretty much anything in the vicinity that he could catch, he's going to grab it. So this week here versus Green Bay secondary that's been up and down this season, I like Johnson as a start this week. DK Metcalf, the next start for me. I know Metcalf, the last few weeks, the numbers haven't been great. And he's coming off a game in Week 9 at Baltimore where he only had 1 catch for 50 yards in that one. But that was a total throwout game for the Seattle Seahawks. The Ravens at home this season have been a powerhouse in the last 2 games. We've seen it from that Raven team, where they shut down the Detroit Lions and then shutting down the Seattle Seahawks. So this week here versus secondary that isn't all that good, Washington Commander team, I think DK Metcalf bounces back with a big game. And I've been waiting all season to see him have that breakout game, and definitely versus this secondary and this Commander defense. Like I said, that traded key pieces, Chase Young, Montez Sweat at the deadline, is definitely a start this week. And the final starts Davante Adams of the Vegas Raiders. Davante Adams, it's been a down season for him, no doubt about it. Now rookie quarterback Aiden O'Donnell in there as the starter pretty much for the remainder of the season, I assume. And the Raiders did beat the New York Giants in that ball game 30-6, but Davante Adams only 7.40 fantasy points. But this week here, matchup versus the New York Jets, I know the Jets have one of the better secondaries and defenses in the league, but Davante Adams, I think he's due for a good game. And even coming off of bad games, it's tough to bench a guy like a Davante Adams, where he could pop off for a big game at any time. Now to the sits, Hollywood Brown of the Arizona Cardinals. So Brown got off to a good start early in the season, but the last few weeks he's pretty much been non-existent for fantasy owners. Besides in that Week 8 game in garbage time versus Baltimore, he put up points, but ever since then, the last month, he hasn't put up numbers. I understand Kyler Murray might be back in this game, and him and Murray had good chemistry and made plays last season, but this week here versus Atlanta secondary, that is pretty decent for the most part this year. Hollywood Brown has been an inconsistent wide receiver, and he's a sit for me. George Pickens, another sit for me as well, since Deontay Johnson has been back in the lineup, taking second fiddle now. Is Pickens in the wide receiver room over here. We know Johnson, like I said, is a great route runner. He's got great hands, and George Pickens, he's more the acrobatic catch type of wide receiver and big play wide receiver. Last week, he almost had a touchdown, but couldn't get that second foot in, and he finished the day with only 1.80 fantasy points. So this week here versus the Packers, I think he could make plays as George Pickens, but the inconsistencies, and like I said, Johnson's the number one wide receiver over there, and both these guys, it just seems like over the last two seasons, they both haven't gone off or both had good games at the same time. So this week, he's a sit for me. Michael Thomas is a sit for me as well. Michael Thomas, he's been healthy this season. He's been putting up 10, 12 fantasy points per game, which is pretty much has been his ceiling. But last week, a shutout, goose egg, it was for Michael Thomas in that game versus one of the worst defenses in the league in the Chicago Bears. So this week, yeah, I know it's a decent matchup on paper at the Minnesota Vikings, but after coming off a goose egg in this offense, especially in the goal line area, going to Taysom Hill a lot, and Taysom Hill in a lot of packages, Michael Thomas is not going to be consistent, I believe, at the wide receiver position. He usually don't crack the top 36 anyway most weeks here, and this week he's a sit. Jerry Jeudy, the next sit for me as well. Jerry Jeudy's been up and down this season. There was rumors he was going to get traded possibly at the deadline, and obviously that didn't come to fruition. And this week here, tough matchup at the Buffalo Bills, even though I know their secondary's all banged up and they do give up yards to wide receivers. We saw Higgins come off 8 catches, 110 yards in that Week 9 game. I just think Jerry Jeudy is not really doing much this season. Cortland Sutton's definitely been the better wide receiver over there in Denver, and maybe Jeudy could turn things around a little bit now that the deadline's over and you don't have to hear rumors about where he's going. But anyway, this week here, Buffalo, if they're coming off a tough loss with the Bills at the Bengals, I think this one, they're going to get things going once again, and it's going to be a long day for everyone on Denver. It's Jacoby Myers of the Vegas Raiders. Jacoby Myers, he had a nice 3-4 week span in early October, but now the last few weeks he really hasn't done much. A touchdown salvaged his day in the Week 9 victory versus the New York Giants, and this week here, tough matchup versus the New York Jets. So pretty much Devontae Adams and Myers, they both don't have good games as well. Aiden O'Connell, it's going to be a long day for him versus this New York Jet defense. And like I said, Myers has been a touchdown-dependent wide receiver anyway this season, so with a tough matchup and a rookie quarterback in there, he's a sit. Christian Watson, a sit for me as well. We don't know if Watson's going to play in this game, but regardless, I'm sitting Watson. Last season was a great rookie year, where second half of the year he totally broke out, but him and Jordan Love really haven't been on the same page. Injuries have been a major factor as well for Watson, missing the first 3 weeks with a hamstring injury and then leaving this game in Week 9 in the victory versus the Rams with back, head injuries in that one with a possible concussion. So that's obviously not a great recipe for success here for Christian Watson. And right now, he's not really a wide receiver that's done anything this season. No doubt about it, his speed is second to none in this league, and he's a guy that could get behind the secondary and make big plays, but it's just not happening this season, and he's pretty much a big boom or bust wide receiver, so he's a sit at a pretty solid secondary at the Steelers. And the final sit of the week here is Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. So Zay Flowers came out of the gate hot this season for this Baltimore Raven team, but the last few weeks we really haven't seen much out of him. This Raven team, they're starting to really blow teams out, and they're running the football a lot. And now with Gus Edwards playing good football the last few weeks and Keaton Mitchell emerging in last week's ball game, I don't know if we're going to see Flowers a lot. Odell Beckham played more snaps as well. He had a touchdown in that game. He's been getting more targets and more work the last few weeks. And Mark Andrews looks like he's finally healthy. So right now in a tough matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, where I'm sure majority of the game, or at least some of the game, we're going to see Denzel Ward in this ball game on Zay Flowers. I don't have a lot of confidence in him, and he's a sit this week, so that's wide receiver start sit for Week 10 of the fantasy football season.